You're standing at a frozen rail yard. Every locomotive in sight is running engines, burning fuel exhaust rising into the dark diesel, humming across empty tracks, even though the last train came in hours ago and nothing moves until dawn. From where you're standing, it looks like waste. Thousands of gallons going nowhere. But shutting those engines down is the one decision that costs more than all that fuel combined. Here's why. Why can't locomotives use antifreeze? You cannot use antifreeze in a diesel locomotive's cooling system. The same fluid that protects your car every winter is effectively prohibited on a locomotive. Pour it in, and you haven't protected the engine, you've condemned it. When glycol-based antifreeze contacts the hot oil circulating inside a locomotive engine, the reaction is fast and destructive. The oil foams, thickens, and coats every internal surface. Passages clog. Bearings lose lubrication. The engine seizes. Repair bills can reach $300,000 or more for a single overhaul. So locomotives use plain water with special additives instead. Water doesn't react with oil. Safe, clean, practical until the temperature drops below 32 degrees Fahrenheit, and the water inside those pipes becomes a slow-motion demolition crew. How does freezing water destroy steel? Water expanding into ice generates enormous pressure, acting uniformly against every surface it touches. Cylinder block passages, pump housings, pipe walls. It doesn't ask which component is strongest. During the blizzard of 1977, when temperatures plunged below zero across Pennsylvania and several Conrail locomotives ran out of fuel and fell silent in the Drifts Railroad Records document what happened next. Ice expanding inside cylinder blocks fractured steel walls nearly an inch thick. Metal built to withstand thousands of pounds of combustion pressure split apart from water-changing state. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in damage per locomotive. So far you've seen two ways a shutdown locomotive destroys itself from the inside, or why smart automation made the whole problem worse. Both answers come from the same place: what happens the moment the engine goes silent. Why can't you just drain the water? If leaving the water in breaks the metal, the obvious fix is to empty the system entirely, but that triggers an even faster trap. A running diesel engine is hot throughout. Every internal component, pistons, cylinder walls, crankshaft bearings, has expanded to its operating dimensions and fits together at tolerances calibrated for that temperature. The moment you drain the coolant from a red-hot engine standing in freezing air, the outer casing sheds heat in seconds, while the internal components stay hot far longer. The outer shell contracts, the core stays expanded. The stress that builds at that boundary is immense. Engineers call it thermal shock. The cracks it creates don't announce themselves until you try to start the engine again and find the pistons binding in bores machined to thousandths of an inch. The engine that survived the cold gets destroyed coming back to life. So you can't leave the water in and shut down. You can't drain it and shut down. Both paths lead to the same outcome. The only option is to keep the engine running, but frozen coolant and thermal shock only threaten the engine itself. The next threat doesn't attack the machine, it attacks your ability to control it. How does a stopped engine lose brakes? Train brakes are air pressure systems. A compressor driven by the engine pumps air into reservoirs, and through a brake line running the full length of the train, that pressure is what holds the brake shoes against the wheels. The moment the engine shuts down, the compressor stops. Hoses between cars have microscopic gaps at every joint, and through those gaps pressure bleeds slowly into the atmosphere. On a grade with air leaking away hour by hour, the margin shrinks until the shoes release and a train weighing several thousand tons starts moving in the dark, with no one at the controls. On the night of July 5th, 2013, in Lac-Mégantic, Quebec, a 73-car crude oil train was parked on a grade when a fire broke out in the lead locomotive. Responders shut the engine down. With the compressor off, air bled from the brake system for hours. Just before 1 a.m., pressure dropped below the threshold needed to hold the train's weight. The 73 cars began rolling downhill. By the time the runaway reached downtown Lac-Mégantic, it was traveling at 65 miles per hour. The derailment and explosion killed 47 people and destroyed more than 30 buildings. The train moved in complete silence. No engine, no warning signal. Nothing to tell anyone it was coming. Runaway trains are the catastrophe everyone can see. What happens inside the lubrication system is quieter, but just as final. What does cold do to engine oil? A running locomotive circulates hundreds of gallons of oil that build a fluid film between every bearing surface. In extreme cold, that oil thickens toward cold grease. Try to start a cold-soaked engine and the pump can't push the fluid fast enough for the first critical seconds the bearings run dry. Engineers who attempted cold starts without warming the oil sum first found engines more damaged by the restart than by the hours spent sitting in the cold. Which brings the math into focus. Idle fuel runs 3 to 7 gallons per hour, roughly 85 to 160 gallons over a winter night. Set that against a frozen engine, a seized bearing set a stalled consist blocking a main line, and the cascading delays that ripple through a rail network where trains run minutes apart. American railroads that pushed idle reduction policies in the early 2000s found repair and delay costs climbed past what the fuel savings had been. The idle fuel wasn't waste. It was a guarantee that the machine would start when called, hold its brakes, and move when needed. When did smart automation make things worse? For nearly a century, leaving the engines running was the answer, until modern technology introduced a smarter solution that accidentally created a whole new way for things to break. Automatic engine stop-start systems, AESS, were designed to monitor every parameter a locomotive needs and make the shutdown decision with precision no dispatcher could match. When all indicators are within range, the system shuts the engine down. When any parameter approaches a threshold, it commands a restart. In moderate conditions, these systems work exactly as designed. When temperatures fall to -40 degrees Fahrenheit, where Fahrenheit and Celsius converge, a level the Midwest reached in January 2019, the assumptions built into AESS programming begin to fail. Cold-soaked batteries lose voltage. Diesel fuel begins to gel. When the system issues a restart command, the starter draws from batteries that can no longer supply the current a cold engine needs. The engine doesn't start. The AESS detects the failure logs of fault and stops trying because repeated failed starts can damage electrical systems. The software made the safest call by its own rules. The locomotive is now sitting at -40 degrees Fahrenheit, with its engine off, water cooling toward its freeze point, and no system attempting to protect it. Industry reports from the 2019 polar vortex describe this failure mode exactly. AESS equipped locomotives that entered emergency lockout during the cold snap discovered only after the damage inside was already done. A locomotive worth several $1 million can be destroyed by software making the right decision at exactly the wrong moment. The next time you hear a diesel running at a rail yard in the middle of a winter night, you know what you're actually hearing, not waste. The accumulated lesson of every frozen cylinder block, every runaway train, every seized bearing, and every algorithm that gave up when the temperature dropped far enough. What looks like the most expensive choice turns out to be the one that costs the least. If there's something you walk past every day and wonder about, drop it in the comments. We read every single one, and the best suggestions make it into future videos. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next.